Welcome to Module 3, Part 1 of the EstimatorXpress Software Skills course. In this module, we're going to create an estimate and estimate several elements of the job using Quick Quote. We'll estimate a range of different parts of the job, which will give you the skills and understanding you need to estimate a complete estimate in your own time. For the purposes of training today, we're going to imagine we're estimating a simple single-story lean-to extension. On the main menu of EstimatorXpress, click My Estimates. After a moment, this will bring you to the My Job screen. This is where you find all of your estimates. Before we get estimating, let's do a quick run through of the top menu. The first button will close and return to the main menu. The Open Estimate button is used to open an existing estimate. Click the New Estimate button to create a new estimate. Click the Copy Estimate button if you want to make a copy of an existing estimate. There's two main reasons why you might want to do this. Perhaps you want to make an adjustment to an existing estimate, but you want to keep the original version intact, and making a copy means you can do this. The other reason you might want to copy an estimate is that you have a job very similar to an estimate you've done in the past, so you can make a copy of the old estimate and then update the customer details and make any tweaks or changes as necessary. The Delete Estimate button will delete an estimate from your computer. Use this button with care. Once an estimate's deleted, unless you've made a backup, it's gone. So exercise caution before you click the Delete Estimate button. The Edit Estimate Details button allows you to change the name, the description and the job number of an estimate if you need to. The Job Status button allows you to set different statuses for your jobs. That's quite useful when you've got a large list of jobs. It allows you to see where your jobs are up to, and it also allows you to measure the success of your jobs. There are 6 different job statuses. Estimate in Progress means you're still in the process of estimating. Awaiting Customer Reply means you've shown your quote to the customer and you're waiting to hear back from them. Due to Start means you've won the job, but construction hasn't yet started. In Progress means you're in the process of constructing. Completed means the job's done, and unsuccessful estimates means you didn't win the job, so hopefully there won't be many of those. As the job progresses, you can alter the job status to give you a clear visual of what stage each job is up to. The Import Backup Estimates button is used to back up your data, which is obviously really important. You want to do that periodically. You can also use this option to import estimates that you've previously backed up. It's also a way to save an estimate that you want to import onto another computer that's already running EstimatorXpress. The Reorder Estimates button allows you to choose how you sort your estimates. They can be alphabetical, by date, by number, and so on. The Get Materials button can be used to request a quote from Crystal Direct. The Find button, which you find on most screens, in this case you can use it to find a particular job. And the Status filter here allows you to filter the My Job screen to show jobs of a particular status. To start estimating a new estimate, then we need to click the New Estimate button. First of all, then you'll see a screen prompting you to select how you want to create your estimate. There are 4 different ways of creating an estimate. The quickest way is to use Quick Quote to estimate using a standard job template. You can also use Quick Quote to estimate custom estimates for renovation jobs or more bespoke non-standard builds. You can import from Plans Express to take off an estimate directly from your drawing, or you can produce a custom estimate from scratch using estimating calculators. This is the option that we cover in Module 3, Part 2 of this EstimatorXpress Software Skills course. So as I said, for most standard jobs, the Quick Quote Standard Job Template option will be the quickest and easiest way of creating your estimate. So click on this top option, the Quick Quote Standard Job Template option. Now we need to fill out the estimate details. First type in a name for the job. It can be the client's name, the job address, anything you want as long as it makes sense to you. For this example today, I'm going to call this job Mrs. Quick for our quick quote. Now select a job description. There's a drop-down selection box here, so you can choose a job description depending on what type of job it is. So I'm going to select the lean to extension option. If the job description you want is not in the list there, you can type it in directly, but the description will appear in the customer quote, so make sure you spell it correctly. The job number is automatically assigned by EstimatorXpress. You can type in your own number if you want to, you just need to make sure it's a number that you haven't used before. Now we can enter the customer's address details. Click where it says click here to enter. The customer address details can be changed later if you need from within the estimate, but you want to make sure they are filled in correctly, as again they will appear on the customer quote. So type in the customer's address details. Tick the copy details to the site address tick box if the client and the site address details are the same, as it typically would be for an extension or renovation work. Once you've done that, click Update. Next you select the price book that you're going to use for this estimate. Typically you would only have one price book, the master price book, so leave that selected. Next you need to select a group of workbooks. When you're creating an estimate using Quick Quote, you simply need to select the Quick Quote Import option, which is pre-selected. Now we can select a start date for the job. Click on the Start Date drop-down box and a calendar will appear. To set a start date, simply click through the months using the arrows at the top and then click on the date that the job will begin. If you don't know the start date for your job, which isn't really unusual at the outset of dealing with a client, then the start date can be changed at any time whilst your estimate's being worked on. But select an estimated start date when you're creating your estimate. Then you need to select a chart type. Click on the drop-down box for the chart type, and you'll see that there's all sorts of standard build programs. Now these charts are not generated from the estimate, rather they're typical build programs for a particular type of job, and we'll look at those in more detail in Module 4 of the training course. So for our training purposes today, we're going to select the small extension chart type. Now we can choose the base specification for the estimate. Click on the specification drop-down box and select the extension specification. Selecting the extension specification means we have slightly higher costs than a new build due to the tasks taking longer. This is covered in Module 2 when we discuss the different specifications. So below the base specification here, we've also got a series of mini specs that we can use to further refine our specification. So this allows you to pre-select different building materials relevant to the specific areas of your build. So you can select the brick type that you'd like to use. In this case we're going to use the 60p facing brick for extension or renovation. You'll see that there are new build or extension and renovation options which also alter the build speed, so make sure you select the correct variation for your type of work. If you're building a cavity block wall or a stone face cavity wall or any kind of wall which doesn't use bricks, obviously you can skip this step. Next you can choose the type of tiling system you're going to use. So there are plain tile options if you're using small clay tiles. Again, there are new build and extension or renovation variations. There are pan tiles if you're using the modern large tiles. Again, there are new build and extension or renovation variations, or you can select slates. So for our estimate today, we're going to select the pan tile for extension or renovation option. For our roof guttering, you'll see there are different variations there, different shapes of plastic guttering and also cast iron guttering and zinc guttering at the bottom. We're going to go for the plastic half round gutter today. For our fascias, barge boards and soffits, we're going to select the UPVC option. We can ignore this next drop down box here because it's for fascias, barge boards and soffits to flat roofs, and as you recall, we're estimating a lean-to extension, so that's not applicable. For the decoration, we'll select the HP Excel default decoration for extensions and renovations. And then finally we can select what type of plant and labour we're going to use for excavation. If you were working on a job where access were particularly restricted, you might want to select the excavation using manual labour option. But for today I'm happy to go with the mini digger and driver. Now the last couple of things you might want to review before you create your estimate are the profit markup. Here you can see that the profit is split into 5 sections, which correspond with the 5 different sections of the price book. EstimatorXpress has taken your default profit figures from the My Settings menu, but you can tweak them here for this particular estimate. Remember that a 15% markup typically works out as a net profit of 0 for the average small to medium sized builder. And the reason for that is that 15% will cover your overheads, which can't be included in the estimate. So if you take 15% as your baseline, add on top of that the amount of net profit you are hoping to make. So a 30% markup, as we've got here, would give you around a 15% net profit. Of course, these figures are very general, and you should speak to your accountant to help you come to some more exact figures. So for our purposes today, I'm going to leave the profit set to the default 30%. You can leave it to whatever default figures you've got set in your software. Click close. And the other thing you may want to review are the inflation rates, as covered in Module 2. Remember, if you don't intend to apply inflation to your customer quote, then changing the figures on this screen will have no effect. So you can update the inflation rates for the 5 different sections, and once you're happy with that, click close. Quick tip before we create our estimate is that if you want to save the job profile you've just selected, so that includes the selected specification, mini specs and chart type, you can click the Save Job Profile button. This means when you create an estimate which is similar in the future, you can set this job profile using the Select Job Profile button at the top here. So once you're happy with your selections, click the Create Estimate button. After a few moments, the template selection window will appear. Here we can select a template for our job. I'm going to make the window full screen so we can see all of the different templates which are available. To help you find the most appropriate template, you can select a building type from the drop-down menu at the top. Select the extension option. This is a new construction which attaches to an existing building. When you select an extension template, Quick Quote will allow you to estimate for the formation of the opening in the connecting wall. It will also allow for the plastering and decoration of the connecting wall of the existing building, as well as the new extension. And of course it will estimate the construction of the new extension, including the walls, roofs, doors and windows. You can use the wall finish drop down on the right hand side to select different wall finishes. For now, select the brick option. Quick Quote will automatically specify the appropriate wall type depending on the wall finish you've got selected here, and we'll see this shortly. So locate the template you want to use and click on it to select it. To practice today, we're going to use the lean-to single story extension template. Now the next screen asks you to select a default specification for the walls and the roof. So if you click on the drop down box here, you'll see that there are different specifications for brick and block, rendered or stone walls, and for cut and truss roofs. Select the brick and block with cut roof for extensions option, and you can then choose which estimating sections you want to include in your Quick Quote by ticking or unticking the boxes in the list. By default they're all selected. You can leave them all in for now and use them as a checklist. That's quite a good approach and it'll help ensure you don't miss anything out of your estimate. So once you're happy with the sections included in your Quick Quote, click OK. So now we're in the Quick Quote wizard screen. We can start by entering the overall dimensions of the building into the Quick Quote wizard at the top. Quick Quote will use these dimensions to autofill data in the walls, roofs, floors, ceilings and so on. So let's leave the width of the extension set to 3 meters and type in 5 meters for the length. Note that we're working in meters here. So that gives the overall dimensions of the extension. Then if we scroll down, you can see the Quick Quote wizard options and dimensions. The data from these options here will filter through to the different elements of the build. So for example, if we leave allow for plastering and allow for decoration selected, the estimate will include plastering and decoration to the walls, to the ceilings, to the window and door and opening reveals and so on. So by selecting the options here, it's saving time. We don't have to then specify that we want the walls, the ceilings, the reveals and so on plastered and decorated because they'll automatically be selected. So all you need to do is work your way through the different Quick Quote wizard options. So I'm happy to allow for internal finishing to the external walls. Now we don't need to decorate the fascias and soffits because we've selected the UPVC option. So we can untick that tick box. You can change the cavity wall foundation depth if you need to. Let's say that needs to be set to 1.2 meters. You can click the Tab key on your keyboard to move between the different input boxes. That's the quickest way of moving through the input boxes on screen. Check the ceiling height is correct, 2.4 meters sounds perfect. Now check the roof pitch. I'm going to set it to 22 degrees because I need quite a low pitched roof for this extension. Check the tile lath or tile batten spacing is correct. 0.3 meters is correct for the pan tile that we've selected. And finally check the soffit width to the eaves and to the gables. So once you're happy with those dimensions, you can have a look at the standard settings. You can change any of these standard settings, and changing the settings here will update the standard dimensions and options for the entire estimate. So as you can see, there are different tabs for the different elements of the build. We've got floors, foundations, ICF walls, roofs, SIPs, and walls. If you click on the Roofs tab, you'll see the different options for the roofs. If you were estimating a more complex roof with multiple roof sections, the standard settings would filter down into each part of the roof. So if, for example, you had an apex roof with a valley and a hip, these settings here would be applied to all of those different parts of the roof. So if, for example, you didn't want barge boards, here we've got the option are the barge boards to the gables, we can set that to no. And then barge boards would be omitted in every section of the roof. Or if, for example, you wanted to use sarking board, perhaps you're working north of the border, you could change that setting to yes. So obviously changing the settings here can save you lots of time because you're just changing the settings once, you're not having to go into each component of your build and change them there. So I'll set those settings back to their defaults for now. Take a look at the standard settings in your own time and update the settings to reflect the way you work. And once you've done that, you can click Save as Defaults to save these settings for any jobs you create in the future. For now, click OK. Now let's take a look at our external walls. So if we scroll down the page, you'll see external walls is the first section of the Quick Quote. As we selected the brick finish in the template selection window, Quick Quote has automatically specified a brick and block cavity wall. You can of course select a different specification if you want to. If you had a 2-story template, you'd have a separate drop-down menu underneath for the upstairs walls. So you could estimate half brick, half rendered walls if you wanted to, or you can set both the upstairs and downstairs to the same specification. We've got some headline data shown for the walls here. You can update the wall width and the cavity width here if you want to. But to take a more in-depth look at the dimensions, click the Dimensions button. and this will launch the Dimensions wizard. The first screen shows the wall dimensions. The wall height comes from the ceiling height that we entered into the Quick Quote wizard. The wall length has been calculated using the building dimensions that we entered into the diagram at the top of the Quick Quote wizard. So you can see that the total wall length is 11 metres, which is 2 lots of 3 metres for the side walls plus the 5 metre wall, totaling 11 metres. As you can see, the input boxes are colour coded. A green input box indicates that the data comes from the Quick Quote wizard at the top of the Quick Quote window. This information can be overridden here, but you'll have to ensure that it's correct. A yellow input box, such as the number of identical walls, indicates that the data has been set to a specific value by Quick Quote. This data shouldn't normally be changed. You can also see we've got white input boxes here. Those only appear within the Dimensions wizard, so if you wanted to enter a height of coursing blocks, you would do it here. Quick Quote has automatically calculated the area of gable based on the template that we've selected and the wall dimensions and the roof pitch, so the gables are all accounted for as well. Click Next, and you'll see in the foundation details here we have got a pink input box. A pink input box, such as the foundation width, indicates that the data comes from the standard settings. So if you wanted to change the foundation width, you should consider opening the standard settings and changing the setting there, as it may affect multiple parts of the estimate if you've got multiple external walls. You can always hover your mouse over an input box for a reminder of what dimension to enter. Here it says foundation width at the bottom, and where the data comes from, so it's reminding us here that the data comes from the standard settings screen. You can click the Tab key to move between the input boxes, checking that you're happy with the dimensions. So you enter the thickness of structural concrete and then the thickness of mass concrete if you require it. Tell EstimatorXpress if you need to plan construct the excavation. And then you can just review the bulking factor for the excavated material. This will be used to help calculate how much of a skip is required. Now click Next. The next screen shows us all the footing details. You might want to switch on the tech labels here to see some labels on the diagram. You can also tick the Tech Tips tick box. If you switch on the Tech Tips, you'll see a tip appears on the top right hand corner of the window. This gives you a bit of advice on what dimension you need to enter. As before, press the Tab key on your keyboard to move between the different input boxes. Of course, you can change any of these figures as required, but they're set to pretty typical figures. So if you're happy with them as they are, click Next. The final screen of the Dimensions wizard deals with plastering and decoration details. So you can see that the main walls are set to be plastered and decorated. This corresponds with the options we selected in the main Quick Quote window. We're also estimating for a skirting board and primer and decoration to the skirting board. If you wanted to omit the skirting board, you could just type a 0 in there, and then you could leave the final 2 input boxes, because if you haven't got any skirting boards, then it's not going to estimate a primer and decoration for those skirtings. I'll leave that set to 1 for now, and then click Finish. Once you've finished estimating a section, you can tick the Completed tick box. That shows that you've reviewed the external walls. It's simply for your own reference. You can still open up the external walls, and you can untick the Completed tick box at any time. Now let's estimate the floor. Quick Quote has estimated a ground bearing extension slab with a screed finish, but of course you can select a different specification from the drop down boxes. Say for example you wanted the slab to be insulated as well, so I'm going to select the next option there. Extension slab, ground bearing and insulated. You can quickly update the thickness of the slab here, or you can click the Dimensions button to review the dimensions of the slab in a bit more detail. You can see that Quick Quote has estimated the total area of the slab here. It's used the key dimensions you entered into the Quick Quote wizard, and it's taken into account whether it's a suspended or a ground bearing slab. Quick Quote's using the total area input box here, so you'll see the width and the length are set to 0, but that's because it's got the total area here. So check you're happy with the thickness of the sand blinding and the sub-base, and then click Next. As you can see, the thickness of the slab has been updated here. You can change the figure in either place. If all you need to do is change the thickness of the slab, you can do it from the main Quick Quote wizard, but if you want to come in and review the details in more depth, you can change it here. Details on the right hand side here, such as whether there is insulation and reinforcement to the slab, these have been determined by the spec that you chose. Again, you can tweak them here if you need to. Click Next, and finally check whether you're happy with the plant allowances for your particular job. If you're happy with those figures, then click Finish. You can check the floor screed in exactly the same way, and once that's done, click Completed. As you can see, we're racing through the sections here. Now let's have a look at the roof. Quick Quote has specified a cut roof, as we selected a cut roof specification at the outset. If you selected a truss configuration, then a truss roof would be specified here. On the right hand side, there's a drop down for the internal finishes. So it's set to plaster and insulate a flat ceiling, but let's imagine we are going to do a vaulted ceiling, so we need to select the plaster and insulate rafters option. Now let's click Dimensions to have a look at the dimensions of the room. So you can see that all of the dimensions on this screen are highlighted in green, showing that they're based on the dimensions we entered into the Quick Quote wizard. So for example, Quick Quote has calculated the span of the roof based on the width of the building and the thickness of the external walls. So all of these figures should be correct. There's our roof pitch, again taken from the Quick Quote wizard. You can tweak the number of purlins, binders and fascias if you need to, and then click Next. So now we're looking along the length of the roof. There's not really much to do here except to check that you're happy with the options, such as the number of barge boards and the number of rainwater pipes. Quick Quote's automatically calculated the length of rainwater pipes based on the height of the building. Here we've got the joist centres and the rafter centres. These are set by the standard settings screen. So if you wanted to change them, you're better off going into standard settings and updating them there, because again they can affect multiple parts of your estimate. Click Next. So you can see that Quick Quote has calculated the length of the gable abutment, but the number of abutments is set to 0 at the moment. In our example we don't need one, but if you had 1 or 2 abutments you could enter the number here. The spacing of the tile battens again comes from the Quick Quote wizard dimensions, and it's correctly set to 0.3 meters, so that's fine. As we've decided to do a vaulted ceiling, the insulation to rafters is set to yes, but the insulation to the ceiling is set to no. Here you can see we've got the sarking board, which is one of the standard settings. If you set it to yes in the standard settings, then it would be included here and added to the estimate. So let's click Next. Finally, check you're happy with the finishes of the roof. They should be correct as they're taken from the options you entered into the Quick Quote wizard. So we want plastering and decoration to the rafters, but not to the ceiling because we don't have a flat ceiling. We don't want to prime and decorate the barge boards, fascias and soffits because we are installing PVC ones here. Okay, so once you're happy with those, click Finish. And that's your roof estimated. As you can see, you're mostly just checking the data that you've entered is correct. All of the hard work's already been done for you. So let's click Completed. Now let's add a structural opening to the estimate. If you click on the structural opening drop-down box, you can see that you can add an opening to a new wall or an opening to an existing wall. So as we're estimating an extension, we want to put an opening into an existing wall. And if we select the opening into an existing wall, Quick Quote will allow for the formation of the opening. So I'm going to select the medium opening template. There are also options for small openings such as doors and a range of different widths of structural opening. So click on the template which best suits your job and then click OK. So here you can enter the width of the opening, so say that's 3.3 meters. Check you're happy with the height of the opening. I'm going to set the reveal depth here to 0.3 meters. The lintel bearing, end bearing is 0.15 meters, which is fine. Here you can enter whether you want to have pad stones or whether you want brick or slate packing. Once you've done that, then click Next. So Quick Quote has set the reveals to be plastered and painted as per our plastering and decoration options in the Quick Quote wizard. If you're happy with the spacing and the length of the noggins to the steels and the number of angle beads, click Finish. Now, this is a really important step that you mustn't miss, as you haven't actually entered any estimated any structural openings until you enter a number into this box here. So type in the number of openings. So we've got one opening of this specification, and then finally check where the wall opening will be formed within. So we're going to specify that it's going into the existing connecting wall of the building. Okay, so once you've done that, all you need to do is click Completed. Okay, now let's have a look at the plastering to the existing connecting walls. As we're estimating an extension, which by definition connects to an existing building, we need to plaster and decorate the connecting wall on the internal side of the existing wall and on the extension side. So Quick Quote will automatically plaster, decorate and skirt the wall, taking into account any structural openings. So check the specification for the internal side of the wall. I'm going to select the plaster and skim to the interior of the existing wall, replace the skirtings option. Where we talk about plaster, the default is dot and dab. For the external side of the walls then, I'm going to select plaster and skim on battens on the exterior of the existing wall. If it were a two-story extension, there would be separate drop-downs for the upstairs walls as well. So Quick Quote takes the wall dimensions from the Quick Quote wizard and deducts any openings and door areas from those you've estimated in the relevant section. So because you set the opening in the connecting wall here for our structural opening, Quick Quote will pick up the fact that that opening is in the connecting wall and it will deduct that area from the plastering calculations. Okay, so let's click Completed to our plastering to the existing connecting walls. Now let's add a bifold door to the extension. Click on the external doors drop-down box. If you've downloaded the Crystal Direct bonus pack, then you can choose from the Crystal Direct catalogue. For now I'm going to use the templated bifold doors option. You can then select a door template. I'm going to use the aluminium 3600 by 2100 5-panel door. Click OK. As with the structural openings, you need to type in the number of doors of this specification that you're estimating. Again, in this case it's just the one. Remember, you haven't actually estimated the door until you enter a number in there. If you add the wrong door or decide you want to change the door, then you can click the delete button here and you can always add in a different type of door. So once you've finished with your doors, click Completed. And you can add windows in exactly the same way. Click on the Windows drop-down box, select a window from the Crystal Direct catalogue if you'd like, or select a templated option. So we're going to go with the templated PVC-U windows option. I'm going to use a 1200 deep 600 by 1200 window. So select the template you want to use, then click OK. Again, enter the number of windows of this specification you're estimating. And then you'll notice you can also add top treatments. In other words, heads or brickwork arches, and you can add bottom treatments, in other words sills, to that particular window. So that's your windows estimated. Click completed. Finally then we're going to add some wall starters to our quick quote. We do this in the walling sundries section. You can use the jump to section drop down box here to navigate your way quickly to a particular section of the quick quote. So if you click on the jump to section drop down box and locate the walling sundries section, if you click on it, then walling sundries will appear at the top of the screen. Now walling sundries consists of lots of different workbooks. So if I click add workbooks, you'll see that it includes chimneys, lots of decorative brickwork, and at the bottom we've got toothing in and wall starters. So let's use the wall starters option, so tick wall starters and click select, and then select the wall starter for the appropriate height of wall, so ours are 2.4 meters. Click on the dimensional template and click select. For speed, I'm actually going to enter the total length of wall starter required. So there are 4 leaves which are connecting to the existing building. So that's 4 walls at 2.4 meters high, so that's 9.6 meters in total. So enter the total height of wall starter required. I'm going to say they're going to take 2 hours to fit. We're going to seal the joint, and there's an allowance there for any sundry materials we might need, such as drill bits and so on. So once you're happy with your wall starters, click finish and then click completed. So we've estimated several different construction parts of the estimate. We can also add some preliminary and sundry costs to the estimate if we want to. So if you click on the jump to section drop down box again, you can locate the section called preliminaries and sundries. It's got a pound sign as its icon. Now from the preliminary section you can estimate all sorts of different preliminary and sundry costs. So if you click add workbooks, we're going to start by adding some planning and design costs to our estimate. Click planning and design costs, click select, and then select a template which best suits your job. So for this example, the small home extension would be most appropriate, but you could select the new house or the large extension if more appropriate. Then click select. And you'll see here that we've got 7 different types of costs which are associated with planning and design, which you might incur in any particular job. So we've got some default figures here which are included for a small extension, but of course you might want to change them. Perhaps our architect's fees are only £400, and maybe we have £500 of structural engineers costs for this particular job. Update the figures as required. You can see there are also input boxes for building regs planning fees, building regs inspection fees, a planning application fee, NHBC cover and site investigation fees. Once you're happy with the figures in there, click finish. Okay, so let's click add workbooks once again, and we can add some site establishment costs to the estimate. So click site establishment and then click select. Now you're given a list of different dimensional templates for different size of jobs. As with the planning and design costs, these will all lead to the same dimension wizard, but you have different default values entered, so they speed up the process of the estimating. So let's select the site establishment for small extension option and click select. So the site establishment workbook consists of different preliminary costs, and many of them are often forgotten when you're estimating, and it can leave you seriously out of pocket if you forget them. So first of all, we can look at some welfare items. So all you need to do is enter the number of weeks that the site cabin or site toilet are required. You can see that most of the items here are bought in units of time, so the unit for these is weeks. So let's set these figures to 12 weeks. You can then enter the length of security fencing required. Let's set that to 0 for this example. And the duration of security fence hire will also be 0. We don't need a JCB to clear the site. We don't need any additional labourer's time to set up a compound in this example, but we do need a skip for site clearance, so that's all fine. Click Next. Now if you were building a house, you'd obviously very likely be making a site compound. For our training purposes today, for this extension example, we don't need one, but you would enter the dimensions of the compound here if you did need one. Once you've done that, click Next. Let's assume no skip permits required. We'll set that to 0, and we don't need any skip parking bay suspensions. You would of course change these to suit your particular job. So we've got a few more sundry project costs here. We've got the insurance costs. So this allows you to apportion some of your annual insurance costs to the job. We've got health and safety costs. That covers things like signage, PPE, health and safety consultation, or software costs if you use software as well. Put any figures you like into these boxes. And once you're done, click Finish. Click Add Workbooks under Preliminaries and Sundries once again. This time we're going to add sundry plant and travel costs. So you can see that you can add several workbooks in one go if you want to. Once you've selected the ones you want to add, click Select. When you add multiple workbooks, you then have to click the Add Worksheet button to open up the Dimensions wizard and enter your figures. So if you click on the Add Worksheet button adjacent to Sundry Plant, and then select a dimensional template for this particular job, so again small single story extension is perfect, click Select. The Sundry Plant workbook then is a really long list of assorted things that you may typically hire or buy for a job. The first screen deals with Sundry Plant hire. All you need to do is enter the number of weeks which each item will be required for. So you can enter your figures into any of these boxes as required, and then click Next. The next screen deals with tool and plant purchases. So the costs of all these items come out of your back pocket, so you need to attribute them to the estimate where relevant. Take a minute or two to have a look at the list. We don't need to put any figures in for now unless you want to for practice purposes, and then click Next. The final screen you see deals with estimating the spoil and the waste plant hire. So once you've entered anything that you need to hire, click Finish. And that's your sundry plant estimated. Now let's open the travel costs worksheet. So click the Add Worksheet button next to travel costs. The top 3 lines here you'll see are for different size vans. So we've got a large van, which is like a transit, a long wheelbase transit or a Luton type vehicle. We've got a medium van, which is a pretty standard transit van, and a small van, which is something like an Escort or a Focus size van. Select the van that best suits you first, and then you need to think about how many miles per day you will drive to and from the site and how many days you'll be on site. So for example, let's assume you have a medium van and your journey to site is 5 miles, so that's 10 miles per day there and back. Assuming the job is 3 months long and working on a basis of 20 working days per month, that's 60 days in total travelling to and from site, and at 10 miles a day. So that comes to 600 miles. So if we type in 600 there into our medium size van travel costs. If you had 2 identical vehicles doing the same mileage, you could simply double the quantity of miles, so you type 1200 in there. We'll see what those 600 miles equate to later on. So once you've filled in your mileage, have a look and see if there are any parking fees you need to add or congestion charges. Obviously these can be significant, so you should take them into account. Once you're done, click Finish. You can review any of these aspects of your preliminaries and sundry costs by clicking the Edit Dimensions button. So that's it for our mini tour of preliminaries and sundries. There may be other preliminary costs which you need to account for. If you click Add Workbooks, you can have a look down the list and add any as required. Once you're done, click Completed. Now let's add a subcontractor quotation. You should be able to see the subcontract quotations section at the bottom of Quick Quote. Click on the drop-down box and select the plumbing contractor option. Of course, you can add subcontractor quotations for all sorts of different contractors. In our extension example then, we might need 2 radiators and of course the piping. Perhaps you've got a subcontract plumber who's going to come in and supply and fit the radiators and connect them to the existing system for £600. So type a description of the quote first of all. So let's say supply and fit 2 radiators, connect to existing system. Of course, you can type in a description that's relevant for your particular quote. Then select the build phase from the drop-down box. Select the plumb first fix option. Then type in the cost excluding profit. Obviously, your profit will be added on top of that. So you'd use this section when you're subcontracting out some work and the subcontractor is doing the work at a set price. And of course, you're making a profit on top of that cost. So if the particular contractor you're looking for isn't on the list, you can just use the specialist contractor option. Once you're done, click completed. You can use the rooms section of Quick Quote to estimate room renovations, fitting out, plumbing and electrics. The rooms section allows you to estimate parts of the job where room dimensions are required. So for example, decoration, renovation, flooring and wall tiling can all be estimated in the rooms section. You can also use rooms as a way of mentally separating out the tasks you need to do for each room within a job, so that you can ensure you've allowed for all of the components required within the estimate. For this reason, you may prefer to estimate plumbing and electrics using rooms. To find the room section, then go to the Jump to Section drop-down box and click Rooms. The room section will appear at the top of the window here. Select a room shape from the drop-down box. So ours is a rectangular room with a vaulted ceiling. And the room editor window pops up. Select a description from the room from the drop-down box. So let's say our extension is going to be a dining room. If the description you want isn't on the list, simply type it into the input box. But if the description is there, it's best to select it, because once you've selected it, Quick Quote will quite cleverly suggest items that you may need for that type of room. So now you need to enter the dimensions of the room. Check you're happy that the ceiling is sloping up in the correct direction. So if we're assuming the connecting wall is here, then the ceiling will slope upwards. So once you've entered the dimensions of the room, you can then link some openings to the room. The Link Estimated Openings button deals with openings which we've already estimated. So all we need to do is indicate that they're associated with this particular room. So click Link Estimated Openings. Click on all of the openings which relate to this particular room. Obviously, if you were estimating a bigger job, you would have multiple openings and they would not all be associated with the room, but in this case they are, because our extension is just one room. So once you've ticked them, click OK. You can also tell EstimatorXpress about any existing openings in the case of renovation or tasks carried out in relation to existing rooms in an existing property. Once Quick Quote knows all about the openings in the room, it can accurately calculate the area of the walls, the ceiling and the floor in order to estimate the renovation, plumbing and fitting out tasks. Now if we scroll down the screen, we can see the different items that we can estimate in relation to this particular room. So we've got the estimated items drop-down box, and then on the right hand side here we've got electrical items and plumbing items. So let's add some electrics for the dining room. Click the Add Group of Electrical Items button, and you'll see that the dining room option has already been selected based on the room description that we chose. You can of course change the quantity if you've got multiple identical rooms. Then click Select. And scrolling down the screen, you'll see the items which have been added for the dining room. So Quick Quote has automatically added ceiling roses, light switches, wall lights, and electrical sockets. You can, of course, change the quantity, you can delete any of the items, or swap the items. Perhaps you only want one ceiling rose, click into the quantity box and type 1. In the same way, let's change the number of light switches to 2. You can click the delete worksheet to add any items you don't need. So let's say we don't need any wall lights. We can get rid of those. Let's say we would like to add a single socket as well, so we can click the Add Worksheet button adjacent to the electrical sockets, and we can select the single socket downstairs option. This is a downstairs wall. And if we scroll down, you'll see that a single socket has been added to our estimate. Of course, you can change the quantity if you need to. So you can see that very quickly we've estimated a number of electrical components that we need for this particular room. Let's have a go at adding a dimension-based task to the room then. So if we use the drop-down box under Room Estimated Items, you'll see there's an option for fitting out tasks. If you click Fitting Out and then click Add Workbooks, you'll see a number of different fitting out options. We're going to add a wood laminate flooring for this example. Click Select. You can see the floor dimensions have been calculated from the room dimensions we entered at the top. So there's nothing to do here unless we want to change the beading or skirting options. So check whether you're happy with the options for levelling and underlay, and whether threshold bars are required. Add a figure here for any sundry costs you need, and then click Finish. So there we've added the component-based electrical items, and we've added an area-based floor to the room. So you can add all sorts of different renovation, fitting out, and electrical items to your room in this way. And if you have a version of EstimatorXpress which includes plumbing and heating, you can estimate plumbing components in the same way as the electrical components. Just a note of caution here, take care when you're estimating your plumbing and your electrics to ensure you don't allow for these elements twice, because you can estimate for plumbing and electrics within a room, as we've done here, or you can estimate for them within the main quick quote window, but just make sure you don't do it twice. If we click on the Room Estimated Items drop-down box again, you can see all of the other items that you can estimate for rooms, including baths, boilers, decoration, plastering, renovation and sanitary ware, walling sundries, and so on. Once you've finished estimating all the items for this particular room, click Close to return to the quick quote window. Here you can see the room you've added to the quick quote. You can go back into the room to edit it at any point using the Edit button. And of course you can add multiple rooms to your estimate by selecting another room configuration from the drop-down box. If you need any further help using rooms, you can always click the Show Me button here. This will launch a video which will talk you through in detail estimating using the rooms section. Finally then, I'd like to discuss adding an additional template. There are many situations in which you might want to add an additional template to your quick quote. You might want to add a projection to a house or a bungalow to make a more complex configuration, or you might want to add a garage to a house estimate. However, if you want to estimate several houses, each house should be estimated in its own separate estimate. You can then bring them together into a project if you have the Total Toolkit or Ultimate Edition of EstimatorXpress. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the quick quote window, you will find the Additional Templates section. If you click the Add Additional Templates button, you'll see a window pops up prompting you to select a template type. So you may want to add a projection, which is an add-on to an estimated building, not an existing building. You might want to add a detached garage or a garage projection, or you might want to add some renovation tasks. Unfortunately, we don't have time to explore this in depth today, but if we close that down, you'll see there's another Show Me video button here, which you can launch to watch a video which will explain how to use the additional templates tool. Just before we create the estimate then, if you have any expectation of doing a similar estimate in the future, you can click the Save to Library button to save your quick quotes so that it's available in the template selection window next time you create a quick quote. So now let's create the quick quote button and take a look at the estimate. It may take a few minutes for the quick quote to import, so it's a good time to take a tea break. So click Create Quick Quote. A dialog box pops up asking if you want to review the lintels and the cavity closures once the import's complete. So click Yes. Then select the cavity width from the drop-down box at the top. So we need to select the cavity wall 125 to 140 mm option. EstimatorXpress will then select appropriate cavities, cavity closures and lintels. Once you've done that, click Apply. Quick Quote will just run through the workbooks and specify those lintels and cavity closures for the windows and doors. You'll see the screen that's flashing up in front of us now is the job summary screen. Treat this as the home page of your estimate. If you ever get lost, click back on the Summary tab to bring you back here. You can see that Quick Quote has produced an estimate by combining the dimensions from the Quick Quote with the specification, mini-specs and price book you selected when you first created the estimate. We can see the cost of each component of the extension, along with the total cost at the bottom of the column. Before we take a closer look at the estimate then, we're going to have a quick look around the screen here. We're going to start by looking at the options on the top menu. So to open a workbook, you would click on the workbook and click the Open Workbook button. You can add workbooks to the list if they're not already in your job summary. When you click Add Workbook, you'll be presented with a list of workbooks that you can choose from. Delete Workbook does what it says on the tin, it deletes a workbook. So once you've done all this estimating, you're probably not going to want to delete a workbook, but if you've added in a workbook that you then decide you don't need, you can delete it. It's not a permanent deletion because you can always bring it back in using the Add Workbook button. The Recalc Estimate button is used to correct an estimate. So typically this happens if you change the price of a resource partway through an estimate. The Save button allows you to save the data on the job summary screen. The Import Plans Express button, you would use this if you have imported your plans using the Plans Import option when you create your estimate. If you then modified the drawing and wanted to re-import it to update your estimate, then you would use this button here. The Run Quick Quote button is for when you are using Quick Quote. If you rerun and edit your Quick Quote, you can then re-import it to update your estimate. The Sort Workbooks button allows you to sort your workbooks. You can move them up and down the list. You can also use this option to save a new group of workbooks if you want to. The Find button is really handy, I use it quite a lot. When your eyes are starting to hurt from staring at the screen, click the Find button and type in a search term to find the item you're looking for on screen. And then we've got the Get Materials Quote button, which allows you to send off a quote for Crystal Direct materials. So this Summary tab is where all of the workbooks are located. So we're looking at the Summary tab now, but you'll see there are a number of different tabs just under the top menu here. Next tab along is the Price Book tab. If you click on the Price Book tab and then select Material, the price book here is a copy of the master price book, so it's specific to this estimate. This means you can go into the job price book and you can alter prices just for this estimate. So these changes will not affect any other estimates you do, and they will not change the master price book. So this allows you to have really unique pricing for a job if necessary. Now the flip side of that is that you might see a resource which has the wrong price and you do want to change it universally, and you can do that using the Synchronize button. So if we imagine we've changed the price of a product here, we could then click the Synchronize button and you get a number of different options. So first of all, you need to decide whether you only want to update the prices for the material section or whether you want to update them for all sections of the price book. So if you've made changes to a labour rate, for example, you would need to select the bottom option. Obviously the top option is quicker because it's only going to check your material resources. You can also decide whether you want to download an update of your material prices from the online catalogue. Again, it will take a bit longer if you do that, but it's a good thing to do if you haven't done it for a while. If you click Next, you then need to decide whether you just want to synchronise new resources, in other words, resources that you've added to the price book, or if you want to synchronise all resources and prices. Again, the top option will take a bit longer, but if you've updated the prices of existing resources, then you will need to click that option. If we click Next again, the next options are to do with the direction in which we're going to synchronise. So if we've made a change to the job price book and we want to copy it across to the master price book, then we would select the bottom option. However, if we've made a change in the master price book which we want to copy into this job price book, we can choose the middle option. Or you can, if you've made changes in both price books and you want to copy them across, then you could select the both ways option. Once you've done that, you'd obviously click Finish, and after a moment you get a box popping up saying that it's complete. For now we'll cancel that out. And next we'll have a quick look at the Spec tab. Like with the price book, the specification here is a copy of the specification and it is particular to this estimate. So you can change items in this spec and they will only affect this estimate. The best way to make changes to materials in your job is to change them in the specification, so that they are used in all of the relevant workbooks in the estimate. You can also change the selected mini-specs from here. You'll see this top menu is mostly the same as the buttons in the specification that we looked at in Module 2, but there are a few extra options here. The Apply Spec button is for if you want to make changes to the spec. Clicking on this button will run through all of the workbooks that use the specification, and it will change the relevant data to match the changes you've made in the spec. The Library button allows you to see a list of all the original specifications, and if you want to select a different one, you can do so. So if you think you've chosen the wrong specification, you can swap it over here. The Save Spec button allows you to save a specification if you've modified some items. And you've got two options for how you do that. You can either overwrite the original specification. So if you want to overwrite the original extension specification here, you can do so. Or if you've made a series of changes for a specific circumstance and you want to save those changes in a new specification, you can do that. Okay, so we've got 5 more tabs here: the bar chart, reports, which is where the customer quote is as well, the address, so you can update the customer address details, profit tab, where you can update your profit percentage for this particular job, and your inflation, where you can update the inflation rate for this particular job. Those are the remaining tabs. We'll be looking at many of those in the final module, Module 4. Okay, so let's go back to the job summary for now. And we're going to have a closer look at some of the elements that we've estimated. So we're going to start by reviewing the brick and block cavity walls. So if you can locate that brick and block cavity wall workbook and click Open Workbook. And then we want to open the worksheet in there, which is called External Walls. So click on that worksheet and open it up. And you'll see here we have got a column of data here labelled downstairs walls, lean-to single-storey extension. If you'd estimated a 2-storey building, you'd have another column for your upstairs walls here as well. If you look down the screen, you can see the dimensions of the walls. You can see the total wall length and the wall height. We can also see the total area of openings in the walls. Then we can see the foundation details and the footing details. A couple more bits of information relating to the foundations. And then we've got some plastering and finishing details for the wall. Finally, we've got the gable dimensions and the gable insulation, plastering and decoration options. If we look further down, we can see the dimension calculations which EstimatorXpress has done. So we can see the total length of wall, the total area of walls, the area of gables, and so on. An important point I need to make here is that we're just looking at the information in this workbook. If you want to make any changes to the dimensions, or indeed the estimating options, you must go back and make them in the quick quote, or we suggest that you make them in the quick quote. Otherwise, if you re-import the quick quote, the changes you've made within this workbook will be overwritten. If you want to take a closer look at the material, labour and plant resources which have been specified, and their quantities and costs, click the View Resources Output button. In the View Resources Output screen, you can see amongst all the other items the facing bricks which have been selected. These were of course determined by the mini-spec we selected when we were first creating the estimate. Another important note here, if you want to change the specified resources or rates of production, we suggest you make the changes in the job specification, which can be accessed by clicking the Spec tab. Ideally, we recommend that you complete your quick quote, selecting all the workbooks you need before tweaking the specification. We suggest you make changes within the job specification rather than in the workbook, because if you re-import a quick quote, EstimatorXpress creates a new version of each workbook, and therefore any changes you've made to the resources will be overwritten. Click the Summary tab to return to the job summary. And now we're going to have a look at the Lean-to Roof workbook. So if we can click on the Lean-to Roof workbook and then click Open Workbook, and then open the worksheet. So we can have a closer look at the dimensions and the resources for our lean-to roof. You can see that Quick Quote has fed all of the dimensions into the estimate. You may find it a bit easier to absorb the information if you click on the column anywhere in the column and click the DIMS Wizard button. And this will present the information in the same way as we entered it within the Quick Quote Wizard. As with the walls, we're only using the workbook to look at the data. If you find there's any mistakes in there or you need to make any changes, you need to click the Run Quick Quote button from the job summary. You need to go back into the Quick Quote and make the changes there. For now, we'll click Cancel to close the Dimensions Wizard. If you want to see a comprehensive roof cutting list, click Filters and then click Filter Material Quantities. Here you'll see a comprehensive cutting list for all the timbers you require for your job. Finally, let's have a look at the resources in detail. Click View Resources Output, and scrolling down the screen we'll be able to see the resources we selected in the mini specs. So for our tiles, we've got our modern concrete interlocking tiles. If we scroll further down the list, we've got our plastic half-round gutters, and scrolling back up again you'll see we've got our UPVC fascias and barge boards and soffits. Again, if you want to change the specified resources or rates of production, go to the job specification and make the changes there, not in the workbook. Click the Summary tab to return to the job summary again. Now let's have a look at the window estimate. So if you can locate the PVCU Windows 1200 Deep workbook and click Open Workbook. And once again open the worksheet. And click View Resources Output. Now in this workbook, in window workbooks and indeed in door workbooks and opening workbooks, the screen is divided into two sections. In the top half of the workbook we have the resources which are linked to the dimensions we've entered. They are the calculated items. So for our window it includes items such as plastering, silicon, decoration, and so on. And it includes the materials and the labour for those tasks. But if we scroll down the screen, we'll see that we have the sundry items section as well. These items are not calculated. In other words, they're not based on the dimensions we've entered. These are lines which are pre-filled with appropriate figures. So because this is a 600 by 1200 window, we've got one of those windows specified. We've got a 900 wide lintel, 900 long lintel specified, and we have cavity closers, and we've got the labour to form the opening and to fix the window and the glazing. Now you've probably noticed that the quantity per item column here is white, and that means we can type in figures or zero them out. So we often find that builders will form the opening themselves and subcontract out these glazing to a third-party glazer. If that's the case, then you can set the window quantity to 0 because you're not supplying the window. You can also set the labour for fixing the window and glazing the window to 0. You'll see there's still a cost associated with the window, £230. That's the cost to form the opening, to plaster, to decorate and to make good. It's the cost to you as a builder. You would then add the cost of supplying and fitting the window as a subcontractor quotation in the subcontractor quotations workbook. Just to reiterate what we've said before though, you should only make these types of changes once you've estimated everything in Quick Quote, as if you re-import your Quick Quote, you will lose any changes you've made within this workbook. I'm going to set those figures back to 1 for now, and then I'm going to click Summary to return to the job summary. Now finally we're going to open up the travel costs workbook and have a look at the costs that have been estimated for the mileage we entered into the Quick Quote. So click on the travel cost workbook and click the Open Workbook button. And then click on the worksheet and click Open Worksheet. From within the dimensions screen we can see the number of miles we entered for the medium-sized van. If we click View Resources Output, then we can see what those 600 miles equates to. So for our medium van, the expenses are set at 70 pence per mile. So for our 600 miles, that equates to £420. Now that those costs go towards the fuel, the wear and tear, and also the vehicle depreciation. And if you don't take these things into account, you're going to be several £1000s out of pocket every year for each vehicle that you have. So once you're happy with your mileage there, then click Summary to return back to the Summary tab. And finally, I just want to talk about how you open up the Quick Quote again to make any changes to your estimate. So click Run Quick Quote on the top menu. A warning pops up saying that if you re-import your Quick Quote, any changes that you've already made to your workbooks will be overwritten. So if you've made lots of different changes to the workbooks from the summary screen and you realise you need to add something small to your estimate, it may be quicker to add the workbook to the job summary screen and to estimate it that way rather than going back into the Quick Quote, as re-importing the Quick Quote will overwrite the changes that you've made. However, if you haven't made any changes to your workbooks, or you've only made a couple of small changes which can easily be repeated, then it may be that running the Quick Quote again and re-importing is the best way to proceed. So just use your judgment to decide whether you're better off rerunning the Quick Quote, making your changes and re-importing, or whether to just make your changes within the job summary. If you do decide that you want to re-import, then click Yes to continue, and then another box will pop up asking if you want to load the previous template. 9 times out of 10 you're going to want to click Yes, unless for some reason you want to select an alternative template. Now you can edit your choices for each section of the Quick Quote. You can edit the dimensions as you need to and change the estimating options. Once you've finished making all of your changes, then you would just scroll down to the bottom and click the Create Quick Quote button once again. So that concludes Module 3 Part 1